class. Aaron already said he's checking, but I figured I'll be up, so we'll learn. Hold on, let me add the class. Okay. The custom was, in the early years of the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe would come down on the second night of Pesach and teach the Haggadah, teach parts of the Haggadah. So we're going to go through some of the talks that Rebbe spoke that year. It was the year 1955. Okay, the Rebbe says like this. Kivan shechaga Pesach kosher im inyan de Metzias Mitzrayim. The idea of Pesach is that we're connecting to the idea connected to the exodus of Mitzrayim, the leaving of Egypt. Is yinagnu atas anigim im Mitzrayim ge'altanu. The Rebbe suggests that they should sing the Chabad song of Mi Mitzrayim ge'altanu. V'rayidua, the Rebbe says it's known. Mashakasav kvay kedushas maricham ya'admer. What my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, said. Be'echad misichaisav, in one of his talks. Shenigun hu alashin de etzem neshama. That a nigun, a nigun is usually sometimes reserved for a song without words, but in this case it has the words Mitzrayim, is the lashon, is the tongue of the essence of the soul. The Hainu Chai Yechida, which is the two higher levels of the 5 levels of the soul, which are Chaya and Yechida, the oneness and the life of the soul. So how does it express itself? Is through a song. That's the lashon. So it doesn't talk, but it sings. You could stop right here, and you could, like I would say, we could have a chassidish of a bringing just on these 3 lines of the Rebbe's talk. Isa b'Zohar, the Rebbe continues. It says in the Zohar that person who's very careful on the holiday of Pesach, says in the Zohar, from unwanted things. Doesn't say exactly, but we're talking about specifically Misrabi Chametz, but also bad energy. V'nizar, and is very careful. In Michle de Mehemenusa, Michle Dasavusa, in the food of Amun and the food of healing, which is referring to matzah. So not only, but not just careful with matzah, but careful with the kavanah, with intentions of what it is to eat matzah, food of belief, like we learned in the Maimer, and food of refuah, of spiritual and physical healing. Is Hina B'Bai Rosh Hashanah? The Zohar says, if this person is careful. Just a footnote, we see the expression in Hebrew that the Rebbe uses is nishmar, means to watch. That's when you're talking about prohibitions. Nizar is to be careful when it's talking about positive commandments. Is Hine B'Bai Rosh Hashanah, when comes the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment. Shabai Pesach M'Kol B'nei Yisrael B'nei Chaim Mizon Yervicha, that each Jewish person is allocated what their situation is going to be when it comes to life, meaning health, substance, mezainis substance, in a way of revicha, of blessings with their family, banai, children. Azai, then if that's the case, if you're going to be careful on Passover, on Pesach, with the matzah and the chametz, not eating the chametz and keeping the matzah, azai ein shum shlita lezeh sheba mishut be'eretz mishalachba. The one that the verse says is coming from another place, which is referring to the evil inclination or the Satan, is going to have no shlita, is going to have no power over you if you're careful with Pesach. It means if your person is careful with avoiding all things, being very careful of being shomer, watching on all things that are chametz, and proactive when it comes to the ideas of matzah, the Satan will have no control over that person when it comes to the day of judgment. This is what the Zohar says. Umuva midivya Zohar is understood from the Zohar, shekol ha'moedim v'Rosh Hashanah m'chlalam, that all the holidays, including Rosh Hashanah, tuluim b'chag Pesach, is dependent on Pesach. So we see clearly that Pesach is not just a holiday, but it's an essential holiday. That all the holidays of the year, even in Rosh Hashanah, is dependent on Pesach. Like we just said, if a person's skillful with chametz on Pesach and matzah on Pesach, then on the day of judgment, the voices of persecution won't have any shlita, won't have any control over you. And every single holiday, we say clearly, what is this holiday? This holiday is connected to remembering how we left Egypt. We left Egypt and then we received the Torah. We left Egypt and God put us in clouds. Everything is central around leaving Egypt. Ubiya Indian, what does this mean? What does it mean how to centralize and the central message of Pesach? Before Chassidus is explained in the teachings of Chassidus. Rosh Hashanah, the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, meaning the new year, Tishrei, which is in the month of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah Mitzad B'riyah. That's how we look at the beginning of the new year, as from the perspective of creation. Kedei Gemara, the Talmud teaches us, Kaman Matzlinan Ha'idna Zeh Hayom Tchilas Mazecha Zichrein Liyom Rishon. What does it mean when we daven today? Meaning the prayers that everyone davens universally is that we say Zeh Hayom. Today is the day. On Rosh Hashanah we say this is the day Tchilas Mazecha, the beginning of your handiwork. Zikaron, or memory of the first day. Does everyone agree that Rosh Hashanah is the day of creation? That's the question. Come on, Rabbi Elazar. So this is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar. The rabbi, Rabbi Elazar, the Amr that he teaches, B'Tishrei Nevrayla, that the world was created in Tishrei. V'ilu Rosh Hashanah Sh'B'Chodesh Nisan. But what does it mean that we learned like last week or 2 weeks ago, Sicho? What does it mean the new year of the month of Nisan? Be'echad b'Nisan Rosh Hashanah l'malachim v'l'argalim. The first of Nisan is the new year for kings and for holidays. But the new year for creation is on Rosh Hashanah and Tishrei. The Kai al Regel Shabai, the Hanur Chag Pesach, what does it mean? Regalim, it's talking about the holiday in the month of Nisan, which is the holiday of Pesach. Hu Rosh Hashanah Misad Torah. That's how we look from the perspective of Torah. You know, people say, today was my birthday. Well, it was my birthday. You weren't born today, but they feel there's something tremendous happened to them in their life that they view it as their birthday, although they were born on another day. So to the Jewish people, the world was created on Rosh Hashanah, which is the first of Tishrei. What's the Rosh Hashanah from the perspective of Torah? When was Torah? When did the beginning of Torah start? That started on Pesach. Like we learned, it says, the rabbis have taught us, when God chose to create the world, Kava by Rosh Chodashim V'Shanim, he established that there should be new months and the concept of years. Right? We take for granted that there's minutes, seconds, days, weeks, months, and years, but that's a creation. The idea that time is divided in such a way. I'm 70 years old. I'm 20 years old. That idea, and there's ideas that come with age, right? The Mishnah tells us when one turns 20, something like, you get strength. When you turn 30, etc. So your life is kind of central around time. But that idea that time is central of a person's life is also a creation. It's not for granted. So who decided when God chose to make the world? He chose that there should be the idea of years and months. And when God chose that who's going to be his children, who's going to be his people that are going to actualize the idea of creation, the purpose of creation. But Yaakov Abanav, when he chose Yaakov and his sons, he said that there's going to be a month, and this is going to be the month of redemption. So once time has been created as a part of creation, that there's time, the creation is divided by space and time. That's an idea that God created. He created that there should be a time that's unique for redemption. And when's that time? That's the month of Nisan. And we kiven shatayra he balabas aloylam. So seemingly, it says that when God created the world, the Rosh Hashanah was the first of Tishrei. That was the beginning of the year, according to Rebbe Lezer. But then when he integrated into that the deeper ideas, what's called the pnimius, the inner ideas of the purpose of creation, he integrated into that there should be a concept of Rosh Chodesh, l'malachim v'ragalim. There should be a new year for kings and for holidays, and there should be a month of Geul, of redemption. And how does Torah have the power to establish that? So the Rebbe says, since Torah dictates how the world and nature should run, right? When God says split the Red Sea splits. Nimsa turns out, Rosh Hashanah, Nisan, when we talk about the Rosh Hashanah of Nisan, where God chose this is the month of redemption, this is the new month for my people, for Yaakov Ubanov. This is the new month that starts the Rosh Hashanah for Torah. Is Shinyane Torah hu balbas al Rosh Hashanah shebetishrei. Shinyane b'Yisrael. God chose that Nisan. He chose then that Torah is going to be the balbas, is going to be the one who rules over Tishrei. Tishrei's nature. Nature has to see how Torah says nature should be. V'hainu. What does that mean? Shiban Haggadah shebechag Pesach totally kol Hashanah. So what do we see? Like the Rebbe opened up again. This is a talk. The Rebbe had the custom in the early years to talk after the Seder. after there wasn't no eating because you can't eat after the Seder. This was a talk late at night, 2, 3 in the morning. The Rebbe would come out and with the Haggadah to teach the Haggadah. So for the first years, I'm not sure how long that cost. He went maybe till 1965. But here we're 1955. And the Rebbe is saying, so therefore, what did he start off? The Rebbe started off saying that all the holidays, the Rebbe quoted the Zohar. The Zohar says that a person who's diligent in avoiding chametz, leaven on Pesach, and making sure to be careful to be in the eating of the matzah. So the Satan will have no say on that person when it comes Day of Judgment and Rosh Hashanah. So what do we see? The Rebbe says, the way a person behaves on Pesach, Tali Kol Hashanah. The whole year is dependent on Pesach. So the Rebbe is starting off his talk to centralize the holiday of Pesach. Like we just said in the Zohar, that even Rosh Hashanah is dependent. How a person's Day of Judgment is going to go depends on how one behaved. So to say, how careful were you with the holiday of Pesach? So says the Zohar. So what does that mean? So the previous Pesach affects Rosh Hashanah, the Day of Judgment, and because Rosh Hashanah is the central day for the entire year, Pesach carries with it not just 12 months, almost 18 months. From Pesach all the way to the next whole Rosh Hashanah, following the initial Rosh Hashanah after Pesach. It even affects following the next Pesach. This means, again, because it affects the bracha of Rosh Hashanah, so it affects how your material life is going to be. Hamshach is the flow a person brings down in their life of banai, blessings with family, banai's children, chaya is your health, mezayna is your parnasa, your livelihood, your income, revicha in a way of abundance, it shall be full of blessing. All that's dependent on Pesach. Vehem is not just the spiritual, but also not just the physical, but also in your spiritual growth. As the Holy Ari says, a person who's careful not to even have a mashu who means from the word ma, something, even a drop of any kind of chametz on Pesach, muftach has been assured. Nothing negative is going to happen to you. If you're really careful, to be careful in a mashu is not easy. Mashu means absolutely no chametz in anything, in any kind of your property. Really, really careful on Pesach. The Arizal, the Holy Ari says, you're assured that anything bilti ritzim, anything unwanted, will not happen to you. From the other side, the Rebbe says, if a person looks now and in a possible review of how we've done last year Rosh Hashanah, or the things that happened after Rosh Hashanah, if we perfected our Rosh Hashanah, and you see that there are things that are not perfect, so you could fix them on Pesach, because Pesach again is a central holiday that also is very much connected to Rosh Hashanah. And this is one of the ideas why one eats marar, the bitter herbs, on Pesach. It symbolizes, and one of the symbolizations is it symbolizes the idea of bitterness that's connected to Rosh Hashanah when a person is doing atonement for the things that they've done that needs refinement and fixing. So there's a bitterness there. Just like an Erev Yom Kippur, we have a custom, the famous Jewish custom, to ask for lekach is a giving, which usually is in the way of honey cake. There's a Jewish custom to ask by the rabbi or someone, if you can. We used to go to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would give lekach, which is honey cake, before Yom Kippur. What was the reason of it? What is the reason of it? If God has decided, for whatever reason, on Rosh Hashanah, that you're going to have to be wanting from something, needing something from someone else. It's a decree, right? The person doesn't want to have to come on to someone else for things that they need. But let's say Rosh Hashanah, God decided that one of the judgments against you was that you're going to have to come on to other people in a way that you may not be comfortable with. So so sometimes you could kind of get out of it by asking right away for lekach. When you go to someone, and that's what the custom is, not just to receive honey cake, but to ask for it. Because by asking for it, you could be yaitza. You could fulfill the judgment of asking for something. So right after Rosh Hashanah, you go to your rabbi, or someone, you go to your spouse, or your friend, and say, could you please give me, I need from you something. I need you to please give me a piece of honey cake that belongs to you and give it to me. So that's the idea of the custom. It's it's old Jewish custom. If a person has a decree, that has to ask from someone else, you should be yaitza. You should fulfill that decree by asking for cake. Same thing applies to Pesach. When a person eats morar, right? The Rebbe is teaching us what kind of kavanah we could have, intention we could have when we eat the morar, right? A lot of people make a whole story about it, but it's a good time to actually use it as a way of tshuva. When you eat the morar and you feel the bitterness, you have to taste it. If you swallow it, quickly down your throat without tasting it, you're not yaitz to the mitzvah mar. You literally have to taste the bitterness. If you swallow it quickly, you're not going to taste the bitterness. A person can be yotza. You can get rid of anything that, God forbid, has been decreed on you, that you should suffer bitterness, God forbid. You should be yotza. You should take in all that bitterness and fulfill, so to say, the decree of experiencing bitterness by eating the bitter herbs. It gives us a whole other meaning to eating the bitter herbs, right? It's an avodah, it's an opportunity. This is also why we say at the end of the Haggadah, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. Next year we should be worthy to be in Jerusalem. Beis va'amim b'shana. When do we say it? Twice a year. Motzei Yom Kippur. The custom is after Ni'ilam. After Ni'ilam, custom is we say L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, as we know in the synagogue, and Bilal Pesach after the Seder. Why? Just like we said, Rosh Hashanah is connected. Pesach fixes Rosh Hashanah. If a person is careful, diligent with chametz and eating the matzah, will override any judgment, and it's also time through marar to be yaitza, to get rid of all bitterness that's been decreed on you. It's kasher hugam. See that the custom. Now it's understood a bit the custom. We see some people, the Rebbe would sit there and chew the marar, eyes pouring with tears. So you think, what's this getting? Person's getting over excited about the marar. But actually, if you think about it, if all the times, God forbid, a person experiences bitterness in any way and form in your life throughout the year, how fast would you have given all that pain away to just sit a little bit in the Seder and eat marar and be yaitze with it, get over it? So the Rebbe says like this: just like we said, Pesach is connected to Rosh Hashanah. Kasher gam Yom Kippur, it's also connected to Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur itself is a conclusion of Rosh Hashanah, right? Whatever is open, however the book's open in Rosh Hashanah, it's finalized. The chasima, the seal, is on Rosh Hashanah, as on Yom Kippur. B'frat b'nilas Yom Kippur, specifically the last moment when we say the nila prayer of Yom Kippur. That's the final signing. So if on Yom Kippur afterwards, after there's the completion of the signature, what do we shout out in the synagogue, in the shul, next year in Jerusalem? We have to bring it down at its root. To bring out where the idea of redemption comes from. It is in Pesach, so therefore, again, we're empowered to get it done on Yom Kippur, or Yom Kippur helps with Rosh Hashanah, with Pesach, because again, Pesach is a central holiday. And again, this is the Rebbe was bringing after the Seder on the second night of Passover, 1955, Tafshin Tezvav. And after the Rebbe said, the opening talk, the Rebbe said they should sing the song of Avinu Malkeinu, which is a song composed by the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe continues. Okay, the Rebbe opens the Haggadah now. And he starts with the first things that we say in the Haggadah. In the Haggadah, we have the Simonim, right? Before we start the actual Kiddush, we have Kadesh, Orchatz. We have all the Simonim. So first we make Kiddush, and then we wash our hands after the Kiddush before we eat the karpas, the onion or potato. So the Rebbe says like this: Yeshnam hasimonim de Kadesh or Orchatz. We have the simonim, the signs of how the order of the Seder is going to go. That we say Kadesh, Orchatz, karpas, yachatz, right? Shekepshutai, in the simple term, what's the reason that we have these little things before, these little notations before the Seder to let us know the order of the Seder? Mataras, and the purpose of having that in the Haggadah, is to help a person remember in all the confusion of the Seder, what's the order of what you're supposed to be doing next, right? Nevertheless, it's not just a way to help simplify the experience of the Seder for the individual, but there has to be something deeper than that. The Rebbe says, because you know why? Like in everything in Judaism, there's not one version of how those simanim are supposed to be. And if there's not one version, if there's an argument already, if it's just a siman, a sign of how you're supposed to do the Seder, we shouldn't have arguments about it. It should be simple. But the very fact that there's arguments exactly about the nusach, what is the wording of these simanim, is obviously a sign that there's deeper meaning here. Admar Azak and the Alter Rebbe who authored the Chabad Haggadah, Matib b'Sidura, the way he published it in his Siddur, Dafkas Nusach Kvishu b'Priyetz Chaim, as it is in the writings of the Priyetz Chaim of the Ari, Ubesiddar Arizal, and the Siddur Arizal means we know that the Alter Rebbe when he authored his Siddur Haggadah, these works, he didn't just he examined I think 150 different Siddurim, versions of the Siddurim to come up to his based on the teachings of the Harizal. The Rebbe says the nusach of the Ari HaKadosh is when you want to get to the real truth of it, it's better to go always with the nusach Ari. So Simon Zel, lefi nusach Rabbeinu Zaken, yeshna chamesh esrei teves. In these simonim by the Alter Rebbe, there's 15 words. Levad teva nirtza, aside for the word nirtza. Tevas nirtza ein nimnus. The teva of nirtza is not counted. Kivan she'ein ze'inin shalavoida. There's nothing to do. Elazui haftacha. It's a haftacha that we're going to that's the end of the seder. We're going to be able to complete the seder again and Shana Bab Yerushalayim, etc. Shagashayikayim is called tesvavim v'inyanim. What's the idea of nirtza? And when a person sits at a seder and does the 15 main parts of the seder, muftachle, that person's assured. No ma'ila lamata shenirtza. L'chein tevis nirtza eini moira al inyan msuim she'adam tzarich lasis k'mei simanim sh'fteza nintzev she'inyan shavaydi yeshna tesvav tevis. The Rebbe says it's not part of something that you have to do. It's just a promise and assurance of how you're going, what's going to be afterwards. We're going to see, and we're going to be in Yerushalayim. We're going to have a seder again next year, but there's no avodah. It's a completion of what you've done. So the main parts of the avodah are the 15. The Rebbe is trying to teach us something. What's the idea of the 15? We know the 15 Shir Amalis, the 15 steps of the temple. So the Rebbe explains what's the Jewish significance in the number 15. The Rebbe says Misber Zeh hu b'gematria Yud Kei. The first two letters of God's name is the Yud and the Hey. Yud is the number value of 10. Hey is the number value of 5. That's the first two letters of the Hashem's name make up the number value of 15. Sheb'Shem Havai, in the name of God. Sheyud Kei, the first two letters of God's name, hu b'chinas Chachma Bina. In the name of God, as we've learned in our Chassidus shiurs before, shiur classes before, the Yud symbolizes Chachma, God's wisdom. Bina is understanding. So that's because again, the Yud Chachma is a dot, which is the flash of intelligence that comes to a person not yet developed. That's why it's just in a dot. The Hey already develops it into space, which is the Hey. So together, that's 15. That symbolizes the Chachma and Bina, the wisdom and understanding. Shehei Moichem, which are parts of the person's intellect. Ukashem shebesphiros al-yonis, just like when it comes to the upper spheros, expressions of God. Harzeh bechinas Moichem. Also, Chachma and Bina represents the God, so to say, the Chachma of God, in a way that God humbled himself into wisdom and understanding. So too, the first two letters of Hashem's name represent in the person's service, a person to apply their mind, their brain, their intellect to God, right? A person could say, my mind is in other things. Just tell me mechanically, what do I have to do? No. You have to put your mind to God. Use all the tools of your brain to understand, study Torah, to understand God, etc. Learn Chassidus. So if the first two letters of God's name symbolize Chachma and Bina, which is wisdom and understanding, and that's the number of the signs of the Seder, meaning to say that the Seder, the experience of the Seder, is supposed to be an experience of the mind, right? So, but we know that what is the idea of the Seder? We know that the whole message of Pesach is all about emunah, belief, and Kabbalah Sol, accepting the yoke. It's before we start applying or working on our mind to understand God. The people just believe. We call Makamar Teres Chassidus Teveyas. The Chassidus demands, and that's why the Alter Rebbe put it in exactly 15 Simonim. Shakol Yeh Bavarim Asagadavke. Even when the Torah says you have to have belief, and even when the Torah says you have to have Kabbalah Sol means the accepting the yoke. It's the idea of bittul, nullifying what you want for what God wants. But nevertheless, as much as you can, and once you've had the belief and you had the Kabbalah soul, you have to try to understand as much as you can. You can't just have blind belief. Even things that are above your understanding, you can't truly understand them properly. At the end, you have to just accept the yoke and do what you have to do with that understanding. Nevertheless, the Rebbe says, Teveas Taras HaChasidus still demands. Even this commitment has to be understood in your mind. Not surrendering. Understanding that it's demanded from you to believe and to submit. Understanding the importance of submission. The Hainu Lahavin, a person has to understand. These are things that I'm doing that are above my understanding, and not just saying, I have tried to understand them. I understand that I cannot understand them. So the only way I could be connected to it is to go beyond my mind. Your mind has to understand this experience. Although, yes, you're accepting the yoke, and that's what Pesach is. We accept God as king, which is the idea of accepting the yoke. You don't have a discussion with the king. Once a king is a king, the king makes a decree. And Pesach was Nigla Leah Melech Machem Lachem Kadosh Baruch Hu, the revelation of God as king. Why do you? What's the idea of Kabbalah soul? Accepting the yoke, accepting God as your king. You have to understand that concept of the relationship of subject and its king. Their hair idea saga through your brain, Yud K, which is the first two letters of God's name. That's why there's 15 signs of the Seder. She Yud hi Chachma. Yesh gam koitzesh Yud. We know that in the Yud itself, there's the hint of Keser. Keser means the rutzin, the want, the time, the pleasure of our, which is symbolized in the little the kites, the little upward part of the Yud. The Yud is really going two places, right? If you look at the way a Yud is written, there's a little part, the little sharp edge that goes up to symbolize its connection to beyond the brain, and this little sharp edge going down to push the idea into Bina and eventually into the emotions. So it also has in it the Kaitzesha Yud, the end of the Yud going upwards. Kvishamavar Rebbe Mamarma has explained in different Hasidic teachings, Shebekatnis Abba Nimsa Gadlus Abba, that in the small part of like we say, the idea of the matzah also, that's the matzah, is the muna. But in the katnis abba, and the little bit of moichin, really in that little moichin, when you eat the matzah, even though you're like a child who eats grains and doesn't understand what it means, but in it is the highest level of abba, the highest level of chachma. Okay, so that's the Rebbe's explanation of why there's 15 signs of the Haggadah symbolizing the number 15, which are the first two letters of God's name, which is the idea of wisdom and understanding that a person has to learn from this. That when you approach your avodas Hashem, it has to be as well that your Kabbalah soul, even your emunah, your belief has to be because you understand that you have to be that way. You can't just say, okay, that's what's needed for me. No, apply yourself, be part of it, understand as much as you can, understand even the processes, understand the parts that you're not meant to understand, that you're not meant to understand them. Okay, the Haggadah continues. One of the things we say in the beginning of the Haggadah, the famous Helach Ma'anya, the Achalu Avasan Ba'ardim Mitzrayim. We say this is the bread of affliction that our fathers have eaten in Egypt. The Rebbe says, Afshir Pashta Sky, Lachma Anya al Prusa. What are we talking about? We're talking about when do we say Helach Ma'anya? After we break the matzah in half, we put away the bigger piece for the afikomen, and the smaller piece remains in the Seder, on the Kaira. So even though when we say the poor man's bread is the small little piece, symbolizing a poor man's bread who just barely has a piece of bread. So we're talking about that small piece of the three matzahs. So we have three matzahs in the Kaira, right? The top matzah, the middle matzah, and the bottom matzah. The middle matzah is the one that gets split, and the smaller part is the one that remains on the plate. So that's when we say Helach Mani, this is the bread of the poor man, is referring to that small piece. The truth is, the Rebbe said, all the matzah is a poor man's bread, not just this little piece. As the Evan Ezra commentary in Chumash says, that matzah is called a poor man's bread. Meaning to say, that not just this little piece, but the whole message of matzah. By all the levels of matzah, and we learned about it in our Chassidus class earlier in the week. Like we talk about the matzah before midnight, The matzah, the Jewish people were commanded twice to eat matzah, right? They were commanded, to eat matzah with their korban Pesach before they left Egypt. And when they left Egypt, we have matzah, that the second matzah, that's the matzah that they were baking that didn't rise. So there's a lot of discussion. What's these two levels of matzah? So the Rebbe says there's matzah koydem chatzos, matzah before midnight. Hein matzah acher chatzos, matzah after midnight. Now we eat all our matzah is connected to all the levels because we don't eat matzah after midnight. We're not supposed to eat matzah after midnight. Even like the matzah after Matan Torah, because now once the matzah Mitzrayim was before the Torah was given. And once Torah is given, the entire relationship between God and the Jewish people is upgraded. So you can't even compare our matzah that we're eating today to the matzah they ate in Egypt, because in Egypt it was before they received the Torah. So there's basically three levels of matzah in general. There's the matzah that the Jewish people commanded to eat on the 14th before they left Egypt. The matzah that happened seemingly by chance because they were rushed out and the bread didn't have time to rise. And the third reason, the third matzah is the matzah we eat today after God commanded us in the Torah to eat matzah. Sha'az gam koydem chatzos. Yeshem kol anyan shayb bizman Yisrael lach chatzos. Kol madregas elu nikub shem lach anya. What is considered a poor man's bread is all the breads, all the matzahs. The matzahs that the Jewish people ate before they left Egypt, the matzahs they ate after Egypt, the matzahs that are connected after Matan Torah, the giving Torah. What do we say about this bread? This is the bread that our fathers ate in Egypt. Avasana, what does avasana mean? Our fathers. And we know in Chassidus, fathers refers to parents, refer to the brains. Avaim is wisdom and understanding. The children are the emotions, just like parents bring children into the world. Hopefully, a person's emotional response to things should be dictated and guided by their understanding, right? When a person's feelings get ahead of themselves, meaning they don't have a healthy relationship with mind over matter, right? Your mind isn't controlling how you're feeling. So a person, as Chassidus is always teaching, that moyach shalat al alev, the mind has to control the heart. So avasana, our fathers, is referring to moichin, referring to our brains, the power of our intellect. What happens when your brain isn't? So there's two problems. One problem could be there's a disconnect between what you understand. It means your brain is free of any restrictions. It's free to think godly thoughts. It's just not responding. You're not emotionally responding to that understanding. So there's a not healthy relationship between parent and child, between Aveim and the child, the children, which are the emotions. What happens if the parents are in Egypt? Egypt means restraint, limitations. Your brain doesn't have space to think properly. That's what it means. When our forefathers were in Egypt, it's a deeper problem. That the moichin, the moyach, the brain is in Egypt. So avasana kayal moichin, moichin imtzayim b'ardim Mitzrayim. The brain is in limitations in the land of Egypt. Hainu b'meitzarim. Meitzarim means in restraints, gvulim, limitations. That's a real gullus of a person. But the problem is not that your mind isn't free, but when your mind is captivated. So we're sitting here today and we're saying that our fathers ate in Egypt, our forefathers ate in Egypt. Since we're still living in Egypt. So even if in your mindset, the way you are in that restraint, you have levels of wealth, which is the brain. Means when you're full bodied, everything about you is in Egypt, you do have levels. So you have the part that within that limitation, so you're up, there's parts that are considered within all this limitation, parts that are richer than other parts. My brain at least has, even in all its limitations, is on a higher level of refinement. So to say, let's say my midas, my emotions. But your whole entirety is in Egypt. So you're still in the land of poverty. Although within levels, maybe the brain is still in a place of wealth. What's wealth within a poor land? Because your whole being is in a place of Egypt. Given the sheklasa in the Mitzrayim is because Egypt is poverty. Ubirin and the ideas, Adacham Super Gemara, the Talmud teaches us. Excuse me. V'maisa v'bitei shel Nagdimain Ben Gurion, the daughter of Nakdimin Ben Gurion. Shepasku la chachamim arba meya zuhuvim lekupa shal pesamim lebaybayayim. Afi kilula isam. Amar lahem kach tifsiku v'naisechem v'anu achri amen. Mashmois divrei Gemara shayet tzedek b'tainasa given shebe'erka harizes schumuot. So it says basically the daughter of Nakdimon Ben Gurion, he was a very, very wealthy man in Jerusalem. I have to check the Talmud, the story there. The rabbis gave her, I'm not sure if it was a charity or what, 400 gold coins, shal psamim, of spices for that day. And she was upset. That was beneath her. She says, this is what you're going to give. This is what you should give to your daughters as well. And the Gemara is right. It seems that she was right, meaning to say that although they gave her a lot, but for her it was a little. Given Shebe'erka, because she came from such a wealthy family. I think the story was that her father was very wealthy, and in the destruction of the temple, she lost everything. But she never left from her mindset. And her mindset, she was the richest man's daughter. And so even something that would be rich for someone else, for her, it was nothing. Given Shebe'erka, he's skumuet, right? A business class ticket for a person who only flies private is coach. It's given Shebe'erka, he's skumuet. V'nimsa. Shemash legabe ploini nachshavas lashirs. What may be wealthy to one person, efshish legabe zulas yachshavanias, for someone else is total poverty, because all a question of what spectrum of how you view wealth. So too when we say matz, even though we say avusana, even though we have fathers that represents ashiras, which is wealth, which represents the broadness of the mind. But when you're in Egypt, that's still poverty for an experience of totally being out of Egypt. The Rebbe says. Even though there's a big difference between poverty and wealth. And the definition of poor means you're lacking. And the idea of ashirs, Chassidus always explains that what is the difference between wealth and poverty is not that wealth, it means you have everything you need. Because that means that's just the completion of no longer being a chasarn, lacking. To be wealthy doesn't mean that you just filled all your things that you're lacking, all your needs. It's more than that. Like the Gemara says, that when a person has the obligation of charity to tzedakah, means you have to give them everything that they're lacking. A poor person, everything that they're lacking, you have to give them. Even sus lircha v'lav, even if the person's accompanied is used to having a special horse, the eved ratz lefanav, and even to have a servant running ahead of him as a sign of respect. Even that, seemingly, that's not essential, right? I need a servant running in front of me. If that's what the person's used to, you have to provide that. And that's still not called making that person wealthy. But you don't have to make him wealthy. It means you have to fulfill everything that person feels that they're lacking. So if you're from a wealthy family who, God forbid, lost everything, and to their mindset, wealth means, lacking means the smallest detail. I have the ability to do everything. You have to provide that. But you still don't have to make the person wealthy. That means wealthy is beyond that. It could be that even though that something that's wealthy compared to a low level of poverty, but for a higher level of broadness, even that wealth is considered poor. And the point that the Rebbe is saying is that that's what we're saying when we eat the bread. That this bread is the bread that even our moyach, our minds, which is the rich part within the person, but it was in Arab Mitzrayim, was in the land of Egypt, of poverty, of restraint, of limitations. This is what we're saying when we say in the Haggadah. Anything. This is the difference between a broad person and a small person. A small person could, even their parts that they're rich, their mind, all that, but if you're living in a locked-in space, that's our Mitzrayim, you're living in Egypt. As long as you have these limitations, Meitzar Mekvulim, Meitzar is restraints and boundaries. God means boundaries not letting you go beyond. Even within that space of Egypt, that's considered wealth. Nevertheless, the God when you get out of true freedom, out of any limitations, anything that's connected to Egypt is called poverty. That's why we say this is the bread of a poor man's bread. Even though matzah represents wisdom, matzah is chachma. So why are we calling matzah poor man's bread? Because you're in Egypt. Your mind, everything is locked into space. The Rebbe says we can have that today also. It's not just we're talking about what happened once upon a time in Egypt 3,500 years ago. Even though today we're sitting after we left Egypt and we received the Torah. When it comes to the holiday Pesach, we go through the entire experience again of leaving Egypt. This is as the Ari Kaddish says. Al Pasik Vayom Ma'elin is come for Nasim. It talks about that these days, when we talk about memory, that we relive holidays. So Niskarim, when we remember them, the Niskarim word comes from the word Zecher. To remember something, Nasim is as if we're doing them. Niskarim, when you relive a story, a holiday, Kitaboy properly, as a guy Nasim, as it becomes a reality. You're able to bring down the flow as if the experience is happening now. Even now. If when we go into the story of Pesach, what happens is we realize that we're still in limitations. It's the idea of poverty. The fact is we're still in exile. It means we could look and say, Egypt, they were being slaved, they were being hit, they were building buildings, the pyramids. Look at me now. I have Baruch Hashem, a big bank account, 2 cars, a nice house. You're still in Egypt. Why are you still in Galus? You're still in exile. You're rich in your mind, which is very nice. It's good. You don't have to feel it otherwise. But you have to know that you're still in Egypt. That's all within the space. Akati Avdi Achashverosh, we're still servants of Achashverosh. Therefore, we acknowledge that. Notwithstanding of Baruch Hashem, of all the good that Hashem has given us, and Baruch Hashem for all the good that we're feeling. But we remember, this is still a poor man's bread. We're still in Egypt. We're still servants of Achashverosh. Vesima Piska, therefore we finish off the statement, we say, Hashata Hacha, now we're here in this experience. Next year we're going to be free. We're not talking about as if we were here now. We are here now. We're in that limitation still today. Notwithstanding of how good we feel. And Baruch Hashem, we should feel good. But we have to remember, we're still not free. When it comes about when we talk about Mashiach, it says, we're no longer going to say, this is the God who took us out of Egypt. Kim Chai Hashem, this is the God that who took us out of the north, the land of the north. We call our tzais from all the lands that we were pushed to in the exile, the bitter exile, the past 2,000 years since the destruction of the first and second temples. When it comes to the final redemption, it's going to be much greater than the redemption of the leaving of Egypt. What's true wealth that we're going to experience in our life is that's going to be Begula Atzidim and the Mashiach. Right now, right, we're playing in the playroom. Small things make us happy. We're not realizing there's so much limitations we have specifically in our spiritual growth. And nevertheless, although we say that, like we said now, that we're going to say when Mashiach comes, this is not the God that took us out of Egypt, but this is the God that took us from the north, took us from all the places that we've pushed to. Nevertheless, he ought to be tzis Mitzrayim dafka. When does it start? Now, when we leave Egypt. And a person has to leave. When do we say that we're going to be free? When we're leaving Egypt. We talk about leave. We have to start being free now. A person, don't wait. The point that Rebbe is saying is, don't sit there waiting. Next year we're going to be in Jerusalem. Start doing Yitzias Mitzrayim now. Start getting out of your limitations. Every person can make an honest evaluation and say, where am I still limited in my life? Where am I still Mitzrayim in my life? So the Rebbe says, start being a person that's Yitzir, a race game, beyond the way out. That empowers a person. All the things you need to leave. So one of the things that you have to plug into when we're sitting at the Seder is not just to plug into the idea of that there's a story that happens, but this is we're starting to get out of our limitations. We're no longer going to be people that are limited, whatever that limitation is. We all know the limtations we have, things we would love to do. We feel restrained. Get out of those limitations. Start being a person on the way out. I said, to go from the lowest place to the highest place. In the things that are petty, that lock us in. Things that are beneath us. To wealth that's beyond us. That's true wealth. And the Rebbe continues throughout the night of that year, 1955, explaining different parts of the Haggadah. I want to wish everyone, first of all, I want to wish all our brothers and sisters that are Nebuch, still captive crazy concept that today in 2025 we have Jewish men and women alive, captive, being held in dungeons. It's not something we ever thought would be possible. And it's crazy that cannot continue. So they should have a true redemption in the true meaning of the word, being free, be with their families, with the ultimate redemption to come Mashiach. I want to wish everyone Chag Kosher v'Sameach. It should be a month of Nisan, a month of miracles, a month of Geula, with the ultimate Geula of becoming a Mashiach. Laila Tov, everyone.
Shireen has a question.
Amen.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you.
Shireen, like you said, he had a question.
Who had a question?
Yep.
Go ahead. I guess she's
No. She's on. She's here. I see that she's on.
Sharon, you have a question?
Let me send her a message. She's a friend of mine. Let me just send her a thing here. Yeah. Let me see. 1 second. How do I do this here?
We'll have to save it for next time, Rebbe Ariel, because I got to run to Tefillah. So, Laila Tov, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, wow, I can't believe it. I mean, she must have
Rebbe,
just.
still there?
Yeah.
Take care, everyone. Laila Tov, Chag Kosher v'Sameach.
All right. Next, I guess. Yeah.